Hey guys, Ken Smith Fishing. You know, I get to fish. Well, like most of us, you meet a team partner and you fish together for years and years. And as many of you know, my team partner Dickie Newberry moved up and fished the FLW Tour this year, and it left me without a team partner. And rather than jump right into a new relationship, and any of you team fish know exactly what I'm talking about, I fished with several different guys. And I got a chance to fish with a guy. I kind of reached out to him. His partner did the same thing mine did. Randy Despino went up and fished a tour. So I reached out to Kevin Lasyone, and we fished now a couple of tournaments together. And there's not been many things occur in my tournament fishing career that have fundamentally changed how I fish stuff. And it occurred this past tournament with Kevin. And by the way, we didn't catch him. But if you don't know Kevin's history, he'll tell you he's a hero or a zero kind of a guy. He's not out there trying to catch a 14-pound limit. He's out there trying to catch a gigantic sack. If you go back to the 2018 FLW Costa event on Rayburn, he caught 31 pounds, I think, the first day, and went on to win that tournament by 11 pounds against a stacked field. He blew the field away. And he had told me a little bit about how he caught those fish. But until you see it in practice, until you see how a guy does something, it doesn't always stick. Or I guess it was easier for me once I saw him to do this to go, aha, now that makes sense. So most of what I know about fishing, I have learned either through experience of my own or fishing with other guys. And I've been very fortunate to fish with Clay Clevenger and Bill Johnson and a bunch of just really good fishermen over the years. And then got to fish with Dickie for years and years. But when you fish with guys for a really long period of time, you may change how you fish, but it's more because you're fishing to each other's style, or fishing, you know, Dickie's doing one thing, I'm doing something different, just to mix it up a little bit. And I knew Kevin and I fished a lot of the same stuff, but I also knew Kevin catches a lot of those gigantic stringers and catches a lot of 8 and 9 and 10 pound fish. And what he does is something so different, fishing the same stuff I fish, but he's looking for very specific stuff. And by the way, you can learn a lot about a guy by watching, by watching what he has on his graph. My graph, anytime I am at idle, coming or going into an area, whether I know the area or not, some form or fashion I have side scan on, and Kevin does the same thing. So he's running a Humminbird Helix unit. Down the left side in a very small sliver of the screen, he's running his map software. Mainly because I don't think he's too worried about what his map's telling him. But then he's running on top down imaging and on bottom side imaging, and I noticed he's 60 feet on either side. And he's looking for one thing. He's looking for stumps. And he would stop and throw at a stump, especially if it had a root ball. Now, if you've never seen a stump with a root ball on side imaging, I didn't have a screen capture of it, so I reached out to Clark Ream. Clark Ream has screen captures of everything, including a pickup truck he found this weekend on Rayburn with the side imaging. So this is what that looks like.
Again, thanks to Clark. So here, our first slide, you see on the left, he's driven directly over a stump, and on the right, you can see just on the edges the root ball poking out from under it. So remember, you're going from the bottom of the screen to the top, where you were most recently at the top, to where you were longest period of time ago at the bottom. Here you see a much better view of a stump he's driven directly over with some bait fish or fish off behind it, but then you see circled to the bottom right 2 more stumps here with root balls, and you can tell that as much by looking at the shadow off the stump as you can by looking at the stump itself. The next one is an absolutely spectacular capture of the stump on the side scan, and then his down imaging video, or his down imaging footage is spectacular. You can actually see how the stump's almost disconnected from the bottom. That's a great one, right on the top of a drop. And then again here, you actually see he missed it just to the side. It's on the left of his side imaging, but once again, you can see it in both 2 and 3D on the right. You'll note how hard it is to see on traditional 2D bottom right, but you can see it very obviously on the top right, and you can also see the bait fish and the fish around that stump.
So what you see there is you see the stump and you see that root ball underneath. And what Kevin does is he'll idle into an area, usually around a point or a creek swing, and he's watching that sign imaging. And then when he sees it, by the way, it doesn't have to have a root ball, but when he sees a stump or 2 or 3 stumps in an area together on a drop, he will stop, he will immediately drop that trolling motor, hit that spot lock, which he said has made life so much easier with his Ultrex, and fire that worm out there. He's throwing it on something just like this. This is a Magnum Bass Rod 3. It's a big long 7'6" luge rod. He throws his on 20-pound Seaguar with a 1/2 ounce sinker, and his bait of choice is a big worm. It's mostly an 8.5 inch worm, but he'll also throw something up there like a 6 cents crankbait. Now, by the way, the only other aha moment I've had like this was, go back and actually I'll put it right here. It's the video of Albert Collins and Glenn Freeman that we did last year. In that video, if you'll jump out to the 9-minute and 37-second mark, we're on a point, and Albert picks up a Cloud 20, and we're only at about 14 feet of water, and he rifles that big crankbait out there, that big 6 cents crankbait, and he starts plowing it into the ground. Now, I have had the fortune of fishing also with Bill Wilcox of Honey Hole TV. Bill is a very, very good, maybe one of the best crankbait fishermen I've ever been around. And watching Bill do it, he will get it, crank it down to the bottom, hit bottom, and then he'll reel it 3 times, stop, reel it 5 times, stop, 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 stop. Albert fires it out there, and so I've always done it that way. Albert fires it out there and just grinds that big crankbait. And I don't think it's in the video, but I said to Albert, why are you throwing such a big crankbait? He said, I want to get it straight to the bottom, and I want it ripping that bottom up because I'm looking for a reaction bite. And that was an aha moment to me. If it had been me, I'd have pulled up there, picked up a Cloud 15, and just barely been touching the bottom. Albert doesn't want that. He wants that bait grinding into the bottom. This is the same kind of aha moment to me, watching him pull up and make that cast and hit specific stumps that he's fishing for. Now, don't get me wrong. If he passes a brush pile, he will absolutely fish that brush pile. But what he said to me was, I'm looking for those individual fish on those stumps that are not molested. And I asked him, I said, do you often see those fish on those stumps? And he said, usually not. He said, usually they're actually up in that root ball. You got to throw that worm up there and get it to fall straight down next to that, or pull it to that root ball and bounce it through that root ball. And he said, if that doesn't happen, and he actually commented, he said, it's funny what you did today, which is just something I've learned to do. I picked up a crankbait when he hit one of those, and I crashed that Cloud 20 into that same stump. We didn't catch a fish on that particular stump, but he said, that's exactly the same thing I'll do. I'll throw my football jig, or I'll throw my big worm up there. If they don't bite it, I'll try to get one of them to react to that big crankbait crashing into their living room, basically. So I mentioned, by the way, what made me realize all of this kind of came together for me was he told me the story the other day of 2 things. The first one was, if you don't know the name Stan Burgay was one of the nicest guys and one of the best crankbait fishermen I've ever seen. On Toledo Bend, mostly, he fished Rayburn, was great over there too. And Stan fished with him once, and he said Stan would pull up to a spot, and he had a cast. He knew what he was throwing at. He would throw that crankbait up there, and if you don't know those Toledo Bend guys, it was always a 9A Fire Tiger crankbait, and they would make 1 pass, and they would make 5 or 6 casts on those spots. And if they were there, they'd catch them. If they weren't, they weren't. And he told a great story of Stan. He said Stan pulled up to one of those spots and made 5 or 6 casts, and I think he caught a 3-pounder. And Kevin said he threw off to the side and caught a 6-pounder. And he said that Stan said, these fish aren't here, let's go. And they left. And they did that at 5 or 6 places, and then they kind of cycled back through them later in the day. And Kevin finally said to him, man, we caught a 3-pounder and a 6-pounder on that spot. Why didn't we stay there longer? He said, well, I probably should have told you. He said, yesterday I pulled up there, I fired out there first cast, I caught a 7-pounder, and there were about 10 more of the same size trying to get it out of her mouth. He said, that school wasn't up there feeding, that's what I'm looking for. And he was doing the same thing. He was crashing that big crankbait into root balls on drops on the sides of those humps and creeks up on the north end of Toledo Bend. Finish the story. So Kevin said to me, that 31 pounds I caught where I won the coast. I said, yeah. He said, I caught those fish off of 3 stumps that are all right together on a drop. He said, they've all got those big root balls in them. He said, I went through there in practice and I caught a 2-pounder off of one of them, and I just stayed, and I just remembered where they were. He said, I pulled back up there, first cast up there, I think he caught a 7-pounder. And he caught all those fish in a really short period of time, and basically he said, if you hit one of those root balls on one of those 3 stumps, you caught a giant fish off of it. And he won a Costa by doing that. So watching him and looking what he's looking for on that side imaging fundamentally changed how I will fish some of my spots, because he and I fish the same stuff. I'm going to suggest to you, you might consider trying this. Yes, it's a hero or a zero proposition. You're probably not going to go out there and get 20 bites in a day, but when you get a bite, they're those unmolested big fish that not many people are fishing for. They're not the fish getting in the brush piles that guys catch over and over. I'm sure I made some guys angry by doing this video, because I do think to some degree this was a pretty closely guarded thing that a lot of guys didn't talk about. And I'll tell you, I asked Kevin if it was okay if I talked about this, and he said yes. And I think part of that's because he knows most of us are going out there and are going to go out there and do it for a half a day and not get a bite and quit doing it. But this is a way, when you need to catch a big fish, that you can do it. Side image those stumps, stop. With a 1/2 ounce sinker and a big worm, you'll know when you hit that stump. Just fan cast around on it till you hit it and pull it through there, and make sure you can make that same cast over and over. I'll leave you with this last thought. Kevin, like Dickie, does something that I don't have the ability to do, and that is when they get a bite, they can recall exactly where their bait was, angle from the boat, how they were moving that bait. There's a lot to that, to being able to go, well, that cast was right there, or that cast was right there, and making that same cast again. It's a lot easier if you have a spot like Ultrex, but it's still difficult to make that exact same cast. When both those guys make a cast, they're looking at something on the bank or something in the water, so they know they can repeat that cast again. You got to get good at that to be able to do what these guys do and catch these great big offshore stringers. By the way, congratulations, speaking of great big offshore stringers, to Albert Collins for his 32 pounds on Rayburn this weekend. Great job in the Anglers Quest tournament there. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Remember, as always, you can get 10% discount at 6 Cents Fishing just by using the code KEN10. I'll put it right down here below. You just go directly to their website, KEN10, and 10% off all your purchases there. And don't forget, we've got soft plastics there now, as well as the best hard baits in the business, I think. So thanks for tuning in. I will have another part of the Todd Driscoll video series up later this week. If you've not seen that, that is a link to video number 1. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're not on YouTube and only on some devices, there'll be a link right there. But if you are, that link will take you to the very first Todd Driscoll video. Really good series of him talking about the state of our East Texas slates, fish care, and some other really cool stuff. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll have another video up for you guys later this week.